Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and talk about your last summative assessment. So you're going to find this under the Unit 3 Villains in Othello, and obviously you're looking at the link for summative assessment here. So your job is to create a presentation that compares and contrasts your chosen villain to Iago. And your presentations are going to take place next week on Tuesday, May 28th through the 31st. Your presentation is due the day you present. So we're going to look at the handout that explains the summative. So for this summative assessment, you get to choose any villain from literature, movies, TV, video games, or other pop culture and compare and contrast that villain with Iago from Othello. And again, you are going to create a presentation and present that to class. And I have an example one that I'll show you here in just a second. For the choosing your villain, anybody really is free game, except the one that I use on my example one. But the more kind of, you want to pick someone that you feel like you really know, and you can have fun with this too. So, really choose someone that you like as a villain, that sort of thing. Make it fun for yourself. Your summative has to have all of the following requirements. A short overview of who your chosen villain is. You want to provide context because um, everyone might not know your villain. You need to focus on 4 of the characteristics of the villain archetype to compare and contrast. So if you remember at the start of the unit, I kind of harped on making sure that you took notes over the villain archetype stuff. If you don't have those, then you need to revisit that video. That's the very first thing that is posted under the unit in Classroom. You are going to have 4 quotes with accurate citations from Othello focusing on Iago, one for each chosen characteristic, and then you explain how your quote represents that characteristic. So where you can find quotes, you can use the No Fear Shakespeare link, and then you would provide the Shakespearean text, not the translation for your quote for Iago. And then 4 examples for your chosen villain. These examples could be quotes or clips from a scene. You would explain how example each either represents or is different than your chosen villain characteristic. And then you end with a conclusion. Ultimately, do you think your villain is more similar to or different than the villain archetype? And then your rubric for this then is just a checklist. So did you give an overview of your chosen villain that provides context? Yes or no? 4 clear characteristics of the villain archetype? Yes or no? 4 quotes from Othello focusing on Iago, one for each characteristic. Accurate citations for your quotes from Iago. 4 specific examples from your chosen villain. Citations for your examples. Explicit explanations of how Iago and your villain either meet the characteristic or don't meet the characteristic for all 4 characteristics. Now for this one, you can do bullet points on your presentation, but this is where you are going to be mostly talking to your classmates about your information. Um, so this is where, if you want to script it out on a note card, you can. If you want to just kind of talk, you can do that and have some bullet points. But you don't want to have just paragraphs of text on a slide. Then you're going to have a clear conclusion that states whether or not your villain is more similar or more different than the villain archetype. Professional presentation. If you're using video clips, it's embedded in the slide itself. You don't have like a link that takes you outside your slide and then you have to go back. And then the no more than 36 words per slide. This is just a guideline here because, again, we want to make sure that you're not having full paragraphs of text on a slide. It's highly organized, easy to follow, proofread, no glaring errors. And then your rubric is down at the bottom. So if everything gets checked here, you get an A+. If you're missing one, that's a B, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So it's pretty straightforward. You either have it or you don't. So make sure that you are following that checklist rubric very, very carefully. So the example. So I did mine looking at Iago and Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I went with the Disney movie version, not the novel. So here's my background. Meet the villains. Again, Iago, y'all know him, saw the play. But for Claude Frollo, I would consider he's Disney's kind of forgotten villain. He's based off the character from Victor Hugo's novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Basically, he's a judge in Paris, and he's obsessed with ridding Paris of gypsies. He is the epitome of what happens when people take religion too far. So here's my first characteristic, looking at age of the villain and wounded. Now, I found this video clip that I think covers both characteristics, so I'm going to have that here and then talk about each characteristic. So for characteristic 1, age, for Iago, I go into my explanation here, and then for Frollo, it's obvious in this clip that Frollo is older, he has the gray hair, wrinkles, etc. So again, notice that I'm doing kind of more bullet points, short sentences, instead of just paragraphs of text. You'll also notice that I have a quote for Iago with a citation and my citation for Frollo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Go into my second characteristic of wounded. Again, kind of talk about Iago. And then for Frollo, we don't know, but he's obsessed with gypsies, especially Esmeralda. So both of those two characteristics for Frollo went from this one video, but I talked about different aspects of it. Now, when you guys are presenting to class, you would actually play your video clip. So characteristic 3, Sin and Vice. This is the song Hellfire. It's a crazy, demented Disney song. If you've never heard it, I would encourage you to look it up because it's crazy cool and really super dark. It's kind of awesome. So, again, I talk about Iago. Iago plants the seed of jealousy in Othello's mind. He's like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. There's a connection to the deadly sin of envy. Here's my specific quote that shows that. And then for Frollo in the song, his hatred of Esmeralda, the gypsies, directly related to his lust for her, which is a deadly sin. And again, for both of them, I have my citations. Characteristic 4, he ends up losing. So for Iago, this is the difference. He actually ends up living at the end of the play. He's arrested, but he walks out of the play not dead. Whereas Frollo in the movie, it sounds like or looks like he kind of has God literally strike him down. The cathedral comes to life, and he falls into the fire that is currently burning down Paris. And then I end with my conclusion. Ultimately, I think Frollo is more similar to the archetype than he is different. His use of religion to justify his actions make him a complicated character. And that's it. So obviously, you would embellish a little bit. You would play your video clips if you're someone who does that for your summative. But again, guys, the big thing here is to have fun. This is, like 1 week before we get into finals week. Make it something enjoyable for yourself and for your classmates to hear. And, think outside the box. Don't just pick the first villain who comes to your mind. Really kind of think and pick someone who would be kind of interesting to compare to this villain archetype. So if you guys have questions, you can make sure you're looking at that handout there. Look at my example. As long as it looks like mine, you're going to get full credit for it. Okay? Hope you guys have fun doing this summative assessment, and I will talk to you later.